first he was like, babe, my whole family was there and it was the best time. Until he finally admitted that he did it because his sister had ruined his graduation by announcing her wedding. He used my proposal to get back at his sister. I left the morning after and haven't talked to him since. I don't know what to do. He won't stop calling, but I'm overwhelmed with emotion.
If you can solve this riddle, you're a genius. There was this woman and she was a serial killer. She would take men on dates and then poison them and kill them. One day she goes on a date with you, but she can't go through with it because she's so in love with you. Eventually you two end up getting married and you buy a house together. When you buy the house, she claims the basement for her work and she says that you're not allowed to go down there. You say okay and you're happily married. But as time goes on, you get really curious and one day she leaves for work and you decide to go downstairs and see what's down there.
You know where I'm too?
If you can keep on draining like that shit, I'm fucking fine with it.
Screwed in a little bit more to turn on the light. Immediately you see all the dead bodies that she's ever killed, and you're in shock.
Oh, join my park.
But then you hear her car pull up in the driveway and she's home. You quickly unscrew the light bulb, run upstairs, and sit down. When she gets home, she goes downstairs to check on her dead bodies, and she immediately knew that you were in there. How did she know? Pause this video right now because I'm about to say the answer. It was because the light bulb is still hot. It's a creepy lost episode of Barney that a father swears he caught his kids watching. One day he was looking at the TV guide when he saw that it said a lost episode of Barney was going to air at 7 p.m. He asked his kids if they wanted to watch, and they said yes.
They all sat down to watch it, and the theme song started playing, but something wasn't right about it. It almost sounded like the song was being whispered. The episode started as it usually did, the kids holding the Barney doll that suddenly comes to life.
But when Barney started talking, he sounded slightly weird. It sounded like two people were talking at
Give me a second to get over to you.
I'm at the front tooth.
Suddenly he said,
Hi, kids.
You got twos already?
Talk to you about death.
so one of the kids asked him, Barney, what's that? He then chuckled and said,
This is...
with his face suddenly turning angry, his teeth growing long, and then he eats the child. And then he
Oh, you're by
proceeds to chase
yourself.
all the other children around, trying to eat them throughout the rest of the episode. And then at the very end of the episode, he sang the I Love You song as if nothing happened.
Yo, you're not on.
Yeah, hold on. I'm putting socks on. It's cold outside.
Hurry.
I'm on.
There we go.
My mom definitely. Once she opened the door, the man grabbed my mom and threw her on the floor. I was so scared, I closed the door. About an hour later, my mom calls me into the living room. She goes, "Sweetie, this is your father." He was bald with a leather jacket on, jeans, and a face tattoo. So I was a little afraid. He was like, "Hey, sweetie, I'm your father." And my mom definitely made me get used to it. As years went by, I was never close to this man, and he never let my mother do anything by herself. So when I hit about 11 or 12 years old, I noticed something was off with my
What the fuck?
There were never affections. So I had enough of
This
being
dude's
afraid of
gonna
my
stretch
mom, so
for
I
it.
never calmed down within my years. She explained to me that apparently my real dad is in prison and owes this man money as soon as he gets out. And he's basically holding us hostage until my dad gets out of prison. He was listening on the other side of the door and he breaks down the door. He then starts hurting my mom, so I ran around the house for him. Called 911 and told them there was an intruder in our home. I later met my real dad. I slept with my teacher for many stories. This story is marvelous. So growing up, me and my two younger sisters were always poor, and my mom was a single parent. My mom worked 2 full jobs.
I saw it earlier. Put it up there. Nice. I got you. Dang, bro.
He's a stretch 4.
I know.
What is he doing?
That.
I fucking hate that.
Ah.
I don't know how that happened.
I then just told my mom it was from school donations because I told the principal what was
I
going
want him
on.
to do it again.
And still to this day, she has no idea. Story time about how I caught my grandma sleeping with my boyfriend. So growing up, I was never really around my grandmother like that, but I did see her from time to time. When I was young, we'd be at the family cookouts, and she'd always
Come on, 2K.
clothes that were at least 20 years out of her generation. She even tried to give my dad a lap dance. By the way, she's my grandmother.
Yes.
She was giving her son a lap
Hold up.
So 8 or 9 was around the last time I even saw my grandmother. So I finally get to high school and I started dating my first boyfriend. His name was Ron. After me and Ron were dating for a while, we thought it was time to bring him to one of our family cookouts. So once I gave my grandmother a heads up that my boyfriend Ron would be there, she got so excited. So the time comes, everyone
Bro,
gets to the
how can I not green in here, but I can green in...
and I turn around. My grandmother pulls up in a 30-inch lace front, skin-tight leather shorts, bamboo earrings, way too long lashes, bold red lipstick, and a tube top. Like for part 2. Part 2 story time about how my grandmother slept with my boyfriend. So after my grandmother pulls up being as extra as she can be, she struts over to us and takes a seat right by Ron. She says, "Hey baby, aren't you glad you came to the cookout?" I was like, oh hell no. So as I'm dancing and having a good time with my cousins and other family members, I notice I haven't seen Ron or my grandmother in a minute. And the last time I saw my grandmother, she was tipsy with the old man, and Ron was somewhere nearby. So I go inside of the house to go find them, and I don't see them anywhere. So as I'm looking around the kitchen and the living room, I hear a squeak, like metal. So I
Good
head
boys.
upstairs, and I started hearing the old lady sounds. So once I kicked down the door, my grandma was doing a cowgirl on Ron. I'm like, what type of stuff is this? Once they stop, my grandma then tells me, I'm just showing him things that you don't know how to show him yet. I just wanted to throw up more than anything. The cookout was over, and so was my relationship. Story time about how I found out my daughter was being abused by her teacher. This story is anonymous. Now, once my daughter Emmy had finally turned 5, I finally put her in school. She was such a people person, she made friends so fast. The first week of her being there, she already had play dates and buddies she wanted to bring over to the house. Except for after about a month into school, her behavior changed drastically. She was a lot more quiet, she wasn't nearly as talkative. She wouldn't play at recess anymore. So I sat her down and I asked her what was going on.
Another slowly,
like,
another
are
one.
kids being mean to you? Are you not getting along? What's going on? And she's only 5. I don't know where she learned to behave like this. She would literally say, oh, nothing's wrong. I just have a lot of homework to do and it's stressing me out. 5-year-olds don't get stressed out about homework. It's 1 + 1. So I knew a meeting with some of her teachers to see if I could talk to them.
Now it's a slightly 2K. Alright, let me find it, bro. And once I find it, it's over.
Part 2. This is part 2 story time about how I found out my daughter was being abused by her teacher. And this story time is anonymous. So I sat down with her teacher, Mrs. Haynes. I told her about the change in my daughter's behavior and that I was really concerned. When I tell you this woman paid no mind to my concerns, I knew she was part of the problem. She was like, well, maybe she's just been depressed lately. I don't know. I said, excuse me, I know my daughter. She's not depressed. She's 5 years old. She even has the nerve to say to me, well, maybe there's something you're not doing right. I have to go. Once I went home, I said, Em, come here. What does your teacher say to you? She then tells me that anytime she would get an answer wrong, the teacher would pinch her. She would call her not smart. She would make her hold it if she had to use the restroom. And if she forgot her homework, she couldn't eat lunch that day. That was all I needed to know. I said, Emmy, turn on some cartoons. I'll be back. I went and got her aunt, which was my sister. We waited for all the teachers to leave the building, followed that woman home, and let's just say she's not physically capable of working anymore.
Dude, snagging. Nah, that's glitch. That's glitch here. Told you.
Story time about how I found out my husband was abusing our child. As my daughter was growing up, she just naturally always gravitated towards me. I wasn't worried about it. I thought she was a mama's girl and would eventually gravitate towards her father as years went on. But sure enough, those years went on and she never gravitated towards him. She turned 9 years old, that's when I became concerned. I came home from work early. I heard my husband yelling at our daughter. I've never heard him yell like this before. Once he slammed the door and came out and he saw my face, he changed his whole facial expression. I asked him what he was telling her, and he said, I was just telling her to do better in school. Up at the top of his lungs, so I was not buying it. Well, after he went to sleep, I went into my daughter's room and I woke her up. I asked her what he told her. She told me, Mommy, he said if I bring in another grade like that, I'm gonna beat you worse than I did before. So it all made sense. This is why she hasn't been close to him. I was like, before? Since when did he start beating you anyway? He likes to sleep on his stomach with his back nice and exposed. So I pulled a Medea on him, and I got some fresh hot grits ready. Then I divorced him. This story time is about how I found out my sister was being bullied. I was in 7th grade and my sister Trina was in 6th. She was cross-eyed and was so scared to finally go to middle school. But I didn't play about my sister. She knew what I do. Now, I made friends a lot easier than her, so after we already got used to the school and everything, I would forget to check in with her every now and then to see how everything was going for her. Until me and a couple of my friends were walking by the bathroom. And I hear these girls in the bathroom saying, "Can you see this? Can you see that?" I was like, oh, see, no. Y'all gonna bring out the worst in me today. So I walk in the restroom, and I see my sister Trina sitting on the floor crying. All of her stuff is dumped out of her backpack, and I see one girl recording. As soon as she saw me, she turned that camera off and took off. Now, I don't want to be too explicit about what I did. She saw God that day. And I let Trina get a few licks in too. I said, "Trina, make her pick up all your stuff." She was crying, picking up all the stuff. She ain't want no problems after that. Story time about how hypnosis ruined my family. So my dad used to
Hey,
have smoking.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna get on later, okay?
Help him get over it. He tried everything you could think
I'm
of.
gonna
chewing
sneak back
gum,
on.
patches for your arm, nothing was working. So my mom started looking around for hypnosis. So she found one and they scheduled an appointment immediately. So the hypnotherapist said she was going to redirect his emotions so he wouldn't gravitate towards that anymore. Basically make him think of something else anytime he wanted to do a puff puff. My mom didn't care what he had to think of, just as long as he didn't smoke anymore. So they paid $7,000 for this and scheduled an appointment ASAP. So once the session was over, it worked. He never did it again. So one day my mom decided to cut all of her hair off because she had so many dead ends. When she came back with her haircut, my dad flipped out. He was cursing her out, asking her what the F is wrong with you. God, I hate it. You look terrible. He was saying he couldn't stand her anymore. He didn't want to be with her. All of that. This threw my mom off because he was always so respectful. She called the hypnotherapist. She then says, "I made him hate cigarettes as much as the teacher in school he hated the most," which